have the honor of being with Dr. Riggio, and she has had quite an extensive history with the history of Trinidad and Tobago, its cultural experiences, its arts, and its music. Please share and tell us about yourself, Dr. Riggio.
I was a James J. Goodwin Professor of English at Trinity for 46 years, and I retired in 2018. Well, I was born and grew up in Arkansas in the United States, and I think that's very important because people often say to me, "What a long trip from Arkansas to Trinidad," and I say, "You're quite wrong. The trip from Arkansas to Trinidad is very short." The trip that was long for me was the trip from Arkansas to Harvard University, where I did my PhD. So when I came to Trinidad in 1991, as I did for the first time for the Festival of Hosay, the Shiite Muslim festival honoring the assassination of the grandson of Muhammad Hussein on the plain of Karbala, I felt right at home. It surprised everybody. People were very surprised at how quickly I felt comfortable in Trinidad. That was 1991. Trinidad is a culture that, while it is sophisticated and international, has an excellent school system, is at the same time moves to the rhythm of a certain sense of festive activity from one festival to the next. And that creates a very unusual cultural energy that I think most other places cannot match. That is, because it is such a festive culture, which lives in the memory of one festival and the expectation of the next, it really has a rhythm that is entrepreneurial, individual, personal, but also festive. One that understands the stabilizing and balancing energies of leisure, of festivity.
Would you share with us how you became immersed in the culture of the Steelpan and Parranda?
I came in 1991 for Hosay, but while I was there, I discovered Carnival, but with a photographer friend of mine, Jeffrey Chalk, and French cultural analyst, Hélène Bellour. We decided to do a book on the Renegades. I spent a lot of time in the Renegades pan yard, working with Jit Samaru. I got to know other people connected to it, and we produced this book called The History of the Renegades. So that engaged me in pan. And then because I loved Laventille and I had friends who lived on the hill, I also became identified with the Despers and got to know Pat Bishop fairly well. And she told me stories about her directing of the Despers. And I began to identify with that pan yard when its yard was still on the mountain. And I would drive up there by myself. It just completely astonished people. What? You're going to Laventille? Of course, I'm going to Laventille. As soon as you turn into that pan yard, you are safe because everybody in the pan yard is your guard and your guide. So that was and then I met Sanch of Sanch Electronix, who has this current project to kind of tie Nigeria to Trinidad, to sort of relink pan back to Africa by trying to create a kind of industry in Nigeria. Now, what I think Sanch offers the world that no one else has is the best recording process for pan anybody has ever invented. He's the only person I know who can truly record pan with anything like its natural sound because it resists recording. It's an acoustic instrument, right? And it does resist that. But because he's been doing this for all these years, I think this current project is a very exciting one. I wrote a small essay for a book that on Trinidad called In Trinidad, but it is a book of photographs. And in that photograph, I talked a lot about the link that Trinis have between home, which is Trinidad, and the homeland, which is India, Africa, and any place else on earth you practically want to name. You know, Syria, Corsica, Italy, Venezuela, England, France, on and on and on. Trinidad is one of the most truly cosmopolitan countries in the world. And so Trinis have to find their lives in between where they actually live and where they're all from. Because almost everybody in the Caribbean, except for that extraordinary remnant of indigenous people, First Nation peoples, as they like to call themselves, came in from somewhere else. And they all came in to produce things for somewhere else. So they came to a place that Lloyd Best liked to say never developed a real infrastructure because it didn't exist for its own sake. It existed to feed the tastes of Europe. All of that has created this really extraordinary culture. And of course, I think the fact that Pan was created out of the debris of industrialism, that you have these discarded oil drums that turn into a musical instrument, is one of the best metaphors for the hybridity of this culture, which builds on its own industrial base only to create art, festivity. I mean, when I first saw Carnival in 1995, I said to myself, I know what the first miner that discovered a mine in California in 1849 must have felt like. This is the mother lode of culture. So I have that kind of long continuing thread of linkage to this amazing instrument. And there's no question that Panorama is still for me the highlight of Carnival. I mean, that's where it's at for me.
Please share with us the experience also of Parranda.
I was first introduced to Parang, oddly enough, after I had gone to Trinidad in Williams College in Williamstown, Massachusetts, because a Parang group from San Juan, closer to Maracas, was in Williamstown at Williams giving a concert. So I drove through the snow and I came to Williams and I listened to this concert and I was enchanted. Through my personal, I find that many things in Trinidad work like this. They work personally. They work through personal and family relationships. And so I've had a kind of consistent involvement with Parang groups, and it's this fabulous hybrid of Christmas carols and just cultural energy, again, with a strong community base.
With Trinidad and Tobago, again, and you use the word hybrid in some of the contextualizing of the culture. Would you speak to what this all encompasses for Trinidad and Tobago?
Yes, well, Trinidad's music has remained in a weird sort of way true to itself. Pan maybe has gotten more recognition than anything else. And Parang is not entirely limited to Trinidad. I mean, my Puerto Rican friend grew up with paranderos in Puerto Rico
Yes.
singing Parang. So Parang is a kind of cross Caribbean music, unlike Pan, which was actually invented in Trinidad and which really has a specific Trinidad origin. The rhythm is so sui generis, so different from any other music that it will be interesting to see how violins, for example, fit into that rhythm. I don't immediately know how that's going to work. So I think it will be a brand new and unusual sound. And it's also just part of the process of change that culture inevitably brings. I mean, you cannot hold it still. If you try to stop it, you turn it into a museum piece. So the only thing you can do is evolve and change. And the idea of merging a Parang band, which has its own particular kind of eccentric uh, rhythm, which is not quite ordinary or normal in terms of musical rhythmic divisions, with an orchestra of people used to playing with different rhythmic bases will be very, very interesting to see. It could be, it certainly will be a one of a kind event that people should definitely not miss. Say one thing about Tobago because I haven't been saying much about it. That is that my partner in the Trinity and Trinidad uh, exchange program was Tony Hall. And he and I
Okay.
worked for many years very, very closely together. He was my closest partner in Trinidad. He was the academic advisor and the teacher for my students. He taught for 10 years up here at Trinity, and then we worked together in Trinidad. And so through Tony, we sent students to Tobago. We sent them to the museum to work. with Tobago culture, and we took them every a semester to a Tobago immersion experience. So even though I haven't paid proper homage to it and my calling it an island rather than a federation or a republic of islands, I have a great fondness for Tobago.
Thank you for giving me the wonderful edification.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.